In this lab, we're going to learn about basic modeling, how to make changes to shapes, how to alter them, and model them into your own objects. And you can start by just creating a brand new Blender file. And you will remember that when you do that, you'll start with a cube by default. And I want to draw your attention to the upper left corner of Blender. Mine says Object Mode in this first pull down. And what we're going to do is explore the idea that you can switch between edit mode and object mode to make changes to your object. Maybe one way to think of it is that if you stay in object mode and you're working with things like movements or scaling or just kind of pulling the object, you're affecting the whole thing. But what if you want to create a new object that might involve stretching or distorting, kind of altering individual points or lines or faces on your object? And that's what edit mode is going to be all about. So I'm going to actually just try it for a second to give you the idea on this cube. Let me switch to edit mode. And you'll notice that the toolbar is impacted when you're in edit mode. We basically have additional editing tools that you'll be learning about. Something else that's important is that there's three little icons that I can click right next to edit mode, pull down, and this instructs it what we're planning on editing. Vertex select, the first one, is about selecting and editing individual points. And maybe that's a new term, kind of lingo for Blender, that they're calling this vertex as opposed to something like, I'd call it an anchor point, maybe if I was in Illustrator. And then if we're going to edit the edges, the intersections of faces, then you're going to be choosing edge select. And then another way to work is if you want to deal with the face itself, we're going to actually be clicking the edit face or face select button. And that's really different. If I switch back to object mode, you don't have those buttons, again, because object mode is affecting the entire object. But let's experiment a little bit by going into edit mode. And first, just to kind of get the idea, I'm going to play with it a little bit. I'm in the select tool, and I clicked a blank area to deselect, just like our regular object mode. And then at this point, I can click to choose faces and do different things to them. And I still have to remember to choose the button that corresponds with the thing that I plan on editing. I'd actually like to pull one of the intersections of two faces. So I'm going to switch to edge select, and then I'm going to try to click on the line in between the edge. It looks like it's selected, it's highlighted. And then once it's selected, I can switch to other tools. Like I'm going to switch to move, and I think I'll pull that straight up. So maybe we can begin to see that one approach is going to be altering objects, but just working on individual parts to them. I think I'll just try one more example. What if I switch to vertex select, and I think I'll select this top rear vertex. And I could use the shift key to select multiple points, just by the way. Let me go back, and I want to just select one point. And then I think I'll just pull that one up higher. So I'll use the blue line with the move tool still active. I think I'll switch back to select tool. I'm done editing my shape, so I'm going to switch back to object mode. And maybe to see it better, I'm going to orbit around my document. Don't forget I can drag the gizmo for that, or I can drag the mouse wheel. So I think that's kind of an interesting shape, personally. So I hope that just gives you just the beginning idea that we can work with editing vertex, edges, or faces. And that's the lingo used by Blender. And I was switching back and forth between edit mode and object mode to accomplish that. And then at this point, I'm going to just actually delete this shape. I don't need this one. I'm going to click on it, hit delete. And we're going to create a treasure chest and then a throne. So we're going to build a couple of objects. And right now I'm in object mode, and I'm going to go ahead and add a mesh. And I'm going to choose plane just to start with a flat shape. One of the reasons I want to introduce this is that sometimes as a workflow, it can help you to initially put in a two-dimensional shape and then edit that. Sometimes we might turn that into a complex shape, and then we can add a thickness later. Sometimes if it starts as a cube and it's three-dimensional already, it just gives you a lot more points to select if you're trying to rework the shape. So again, sometimes starting with 2D, creating a desired shape, and then making it thicker is actually a good workflow. And we're going to edit this in edit mode. So I'm going to switch to that into the upper corner. And it might be easier to change the view. I'm going to click on the Z icon to do that top-down view. And I'm using the gizmo. Again, just click Z over here to get that top-down view. Remember, you can click X, Y, Z to change the way you're viewing it. It's funny, X and Y are really showing you that the plane has no thickness yet. But let's go to the Z view, the top-down view, and it'll make it a little bit easier to work on the shape. So just to practice using edit mode, let's use it to select the top two vertices. And then we're going to change this square into more of a rectangle kind of proportion. And bear in mind, we're kind of practicing the idea that you can edit these shapes. So make sure you're choosing vertex select. And then I'm going to click on the upper corner. If it's white, I can tell it's selected. I forget I can zoom in closer, by the way. I think I'm going to just roll the mouse wheel to get a little closer. And then I can use Shift and I'm going to select the second vertex in the upper right corner. And then I'm going to switch over to Move Tool. And I'm going to drag down. Just going to want to make this look more rectangular in proportion. Maybe I'll make it about half the width that it used to be. And I was pulling on my green arrow just to move it in a single direction along the y-axis. So I'm finished moving those vertexes. And I think I'll just jump back to the select tool for a moment and deselect by clicking a blank area. And then at this point, I'm going to view it in the more three-dimensional view. You can drag your gizmo, or you can drag with the mouse wheel. Just want to see this in perspective. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and extrude to add a thickness. So one workflow would be to make changes to some of your points or lines on a 2D surface. And then when you're finished adjusting it, go ahead and add thickness. So if you're still in edit mode, you'll have tools in here to make changes. One of them is called Extrude. And I can grab a surface and kind of lift it up. So what we're going to do is use face select. So I can click on the face to select it. And then I'm going to choose Extrude Region. And as soon as I choose that tool, you'll see this yellow icon with a plus symbol sticking up. And they call that a normal. It's a funny phrase, but it's just the name of the handle that extends out and controls the depth. So it's kind of magic. When I pull on that, it looks like it's lifting up, and it's actually adding a thickness. It's creating more of a three-dimensional effect out of my flat plane. So I'm kind of trying to make a treasure chest, and it's kind of up to you how thick you want to make it. That looks pretty good to me. So I'll go ahead and release and just back out of the tool. I can go ahead and switch back to select box, maybe deselect. I'm just going to preview it just to see if I like the general proportion. And then we'll move to our next step. Maybe I can zoom in just a little bit closer. The next tool I'd like to try is the Bevel Tool. Might be nice to have a beveled edge along the top. So I'm going to go ahead and check I'm in face select, and I'll select the top face. So basically you can choose a particular face or even all of them if you want to bevel more than one. So I'll choose the top one in my case, and then when you select the bevel tool, you'll see a yellow handle. And then this one's kind of fun. You start to pull on it, and you're affecting it first through angle. So just play with that a little bit. The angle you drag is affecting the angle, and then you can also pull it shorter or taller to make the thing thicker. So again, I want it to just kind of look like a piece of furniture, a chest with a bevel top. And so that I'm going to go ahead and release. And then after using this tool, there's a little pop-up menu. And yours might look like this at first, where it's toggled closed, but appears in the corner right after doing bevel. I didn't point this out earlier, but the next time you try extruding, you'll notice the same thing, that after you drag the handle for the normal, when you release, there's an option for a menu that can show you more controls or information. So just for example, I'm going to open it up and just see that there are options I could adjust. And I think it's also nice sometimes to look here and see what your measurements are. And you may use that in the future if you want the exact same bevel, for example. Then I think I'll just toggle that close. And I'm going to go back to the select tool for the moment. The next step is that I'd like to make it feel like there's sort of a hole inside the treasure chest, and I need to have also a little thickness on the edge here. So sometimes you need an extra face to work with in order to do something like inset or step in. And then I can drop down or drop up with extrude. So kind of watch how I do this. I'm going to go ahead and select face again, the top face. And then there is a tool called Inset Faces. So you go ahead and click on that. And then this time when I drag the handle, kind of up or down, you can see what's actually happening is it's created a new face. It's almost like it duplicated the face I had selected. And then I can drag to inset it. I can make it a smaller shape. And what I'm thinking is it's supposed to be representing the thickness of the wall of the treasure chest. So I'm just going to inset a little bit. That looks good to me, so I'll go ahead and release. And if I like, I can open up Inset Faces and kind of see the options down here as an aside. And then I'm going to use Extrude. We used that earlier. This time I'm going to point out that you can push up or push down with Extrude, depending on what you want to do. So we're going to do Extrude. I'm going to grab the normal. And this time it's going down. It's kind of interesting. I'm going to change my view a little bit. This is where I really like having the mouse with the wheel, because I can change the view by dragging the mouse wheel. I still want to see this three-dimensionally, but I thought if I look down into it a little bit more, I can see better how much I want to extrude. Go back to playing with this. So almost there, we've kind of created the base of the treasure chest. I'll go ahead and switch to the select tool and deselect. We can take a look at it a little bit. Now we're going to create a lid to our treasure chest by adding another object. So at this point, I think I could leave edit mode. I'm going to go back to object mode for a little bit. And I want to remind you, you can add additional objects. So I'll go up to add mesh. And this time I'm going to go ahead and start with a three-dimensional shape. I'm going to use a cube. Seems like a rather big object. And then I'm going to scale this. So don't forget, you have tools like scale. And I want to make this look thinner and smaller. I'm going to also use move tool to help me with this a little bit. I'm going to kind of lift it up a little bit higher. And I'm going to remind you something. It may take me a minute or two to scale this. And remind you that I can use these different views. Like I might switch between X and Y and match things like the width of the actual chest. Sometimes it is easier when you're in the flat view to work. So for example, I can go to scale and start to adjust that. Let me use my move tool as well. Oops. I want it to be thinner. Again, it's going to be a lid ultimately. And I'll keep kind of scaling and adjusting. I'm going to have it be just a little bit above the chest itself. Might still a bit long there, so I'm going to adjust that. And then I might go to another view, and I think I'll make it wider this way too. So it starts to show, by the way, that viewing your object in different views is super helpful. I like the 3D view. Right now I'm using the mouse wheel and dragging, or you can drag on the gizmo for that in the kind of middle areas. But for precise work, it's a lot easier for me to switch back to sort of these side views. Is one way to look at the work. So I finished scaling mine. I've been checking the X and Y view. So it looks like it's lined up with the outer edges, the chest itself. And I like the thickness of it. I like to have the top of the lid have kind of an angled shape to it. So for that, I'm going to go into edit mode. So I can work on it more specifically, work on parts. And let's use the face select mode and your select tool. And let's go ahead and choose the top face. And then this time I'm going to right click, or you can control click, excuse me, command click on Macintosh. And what I want to get is the command labeled poke faces, which is a really kind of funny phrase to say poke, but it splits it into more of an angled shape. It's almost like it drew an X across it. Another way to describe it is it's dividing a surface into triangular shapes. And then what I want to do is, after choosing poke face, I want to choose the top point and just lift up. So for that, let me switch to the vertex select, and I want to click just in the very center point, and then I'll switch to move. And I'm going to pull straight up with my blue arrow. And that's interesting workflow to see. You're getting access to more commands through right click. And I think I misspoke there. It is control click or right click. So if on Mac, you can actually set it so you can right click. But if you aren't using your mouse in that way, the control key will bring up shortcuts for you. And then let's switch back into object mode. We're almost finished with this file. I'd like to take a moment and organize it. I'm in the outliner scene collection panel in the upper right corner. You can see where we added objects like the cube and the plane. But it's a really good practice to give these better names. So for example, maybe the cube could be called something like the chest cover. Maybe I can call the plane something like the chest base. Right now, everything is in one collection. I can toggle that open or close, but I want to show you that you can work with multiple collections to organize files. So for example, I'm going to right click on the panel and choose new collection. So you can have multiple collections. And I'm going to name this one treasure chest. Imagine having more than one piece of furniture in a scene that you're creating. Maybe there's a collection for each one. And then you can drag objects into it. So I'm just going to drag the base and the cover so that they're inside the treasure chest collection. You can toggle it closed again to kind of see if the objects are inside of it. And there's actually a lot of little icons that try to give you information. My first collection still has the camera and light in it. And treasure chest has icons showing that it contains mesh objects. And if you toggle it closed, they'll give you a little summary icon. Like this is trying to show there's 2 meshes inside. So imagine if you have a lot of objects, maybe sometimes it's useful to collapse the individual collections, and you can still get a lot of quick information about the contents through these icons. So that at this point, you can go ahead and save the file with your last name, first name, and then treasure chest as a blend file, and then you can submit it and you're all set. We're going to create, by the way, a new object. So we're going to have a second file where you're going to be creating a 3D throne, kind of to go along with the chest. But you can start a new document for that. Okay, started up a brand new file, and we're going to create a throne. And you can start with the default cube that you should get from Blender in your new document. Or if you need to, you can go to Add Mesh Cube. And the first thing we're going to do is kind of flatten it. So it's maybe about 1/3 of its current height. So I'm using object mode, and I'll go ahead and select the object, and let me go to scale. And I'm going to grab the blue handle, and I'm going to flatten this to about 1/3. I want to actually point out that if you want to, you can look at the properties panel under transform. I'm under object properties. And as I'm scaling that, if you watch the numbers, the Z value is changing. They defaulted to the cube being 1 meter. But as an aside, you can type things in. So if you wanted to, you can kind of drag over there or type in values. So I think I'll set it to 0.33. So it's about 1/3 its original height. It's interesting to see you do have values over here under scale. It's a little different way to work. And then I think about it making the X and Y proportions larger. Maybe we can view this straight down. I'm going to click the Z button for that top view, orthographic view. The grid can help you too, by the way, sort of have almost like units here. And I want to make both X and Y about 3 times the current size. I just want to remind you that you could drag the icon in between those two in order to adjust both at the same time. So let's go to approximately 3 meters. And I can kind of look at the grid as I'm scaling here visually, or I can look over at the values to be a little bit more precise. Again, I could still adjust this further, but I think 2.955 is good for me. I'm going to go ahead and go with that. And then let's view that in 3 dimensions. So I'm going to drag with my mouse button, the middle button rather, the mouse wheel, in order to view that, or use your gizmo. And that's going to become the seat of our throne. So we've started with a cube, done a little bit of scaling, kind of taken note of measurements for the first time over here in the transform area of object properties. I think I'll just switch back to the select tool for the moment. I like to divide the surface up into more pieces that I can extrude. For example, I like to extrude some legs, but right now, if it's one big surface, that's not going to work for me. So I'll show you. I can go into edit mode, and one of the tools that we can use is called loop cut, and it can cut through the entire 3-dimensional object. If I just actually hover near the different edges, you can see that it's highlighting where it could cut. It's almost like taking string and cutting through a block of cheese. It's going all the way through the 3D object. So one way to use this is to kind of hover until you see it is cutting the dimension or direction you want to cut. and then you can click and drag to position it. So I think I'll start by holding my cursor along the edge that's parallel to the red axis, the x-axis, and then I can click again. You can start to drag to manually position your cut if you like, but once I let go, the loop cut and slide box is available down here on the left, and you can toggle it open if you need to get more information. And it's interesting because here you can set precise quantities. And I'm thinking of an undo, by the way, because if I had it dragged it, they would be more equally positioned. So let me back up step with Control Z, and I'll just start the process again where I choose loop cut. And let me kind of click with it to start it and just let go without dragging. That way, again, it's originating in the center. And then I'm going to go ahead and increase the number of cuts. And this is a nice way to make them a little more equidistant. So I'm going to add 3 cuts to this, and then I want to repeat the process in the opposite direction. So let me click over here to have a cut that's cutting through the x-axis, and then I'm going to also increase the number of cuts to 3. So look at all the surfaces I have to work with. At this point, I can switch over to my next task. And I'm going to use the select tool. And let me switch this to face select. And we're going to be creating legs. I want to extrude the 4 corner pieces from the bottom. So let me take a second and change my view so I can actually see the bottom of the chair. And then I'm going to click with my select tool and remind you that I'm in the face select mode. So I'm choosing the corner, and I'm going to use the shift key so that I can select all 4 corners at one time, all 4 of the new faces. And then I'm going to use the extrude tool, choose Extrude Region, and I can start to drag, and these are going to become the legs. So you can make that the throne legs as deep as you want. That looks good to me. And then maybe I can just preview. So I'm dragging again with mouse wheel, or you can use the gizmo to help you change your preview. I also want to create a backing to the chair. So I think I'll do something similar and select more faces and extrude them to create the back. So let me switch to select tool, double checking I'm in edit mode, and select face. And then I'll click and shift click to get all 4 pieces selected back here. And then I'll extrude them. So start to think about all the different shapes you could make by doing combinations of dividing to create surfaces. And we used loop cut for that. And then extrude to kind of push, pull different sections. By the way, when I released, it actually created another surface there. I can undo with Control Z just to back up, change my view so that I have a little more area to work on. And then I'm going to extrude one more time. So I'm going to pull mine straight up. This is going to become kind of the backing of our throne. I'm going to make it nice and tall. Sometimes it's helpful to merge faces together. So to simplify the very top of the chair here and help me manipulate it further, I would like to merge those little pieces together. I already have them selected, and I'm going to right click, and one of the options for you is called dissolve faces. It's kind of a funny phrase, but it means that the edges that touch will dissolve into each other and just become a single object. Another way to think of dissolve faces is it's merging those pieces together. Again, I think it's going to make it easier for me for the next step, because then I'm going to right click and use poke. You remember that that's the one that is creating kind of triangular subdivisions. And I want to take the very center point and pull up to finish the throne. So let me switch to vertex selection. And I want to select just that very top point. And then I'll switch to move. And I'm just going to pull it straight up. And if I hadn't been able to merge the faces together, then creating this top piece would be difficult. So it's interesting, some of the options I'm getting on right click, like poke to divide into triangles or dissolve faces to merge together some of the faces. And I'm really done at this stage. I could switch to select tool. Maybe I'll just go back to object mode, and I can turn and rotate this just to see what my final throne looks like. And I can save this and go ahead and submit it for the lab. And keep thinking how you can use these techniques to create objects for your project.